So 68% said that they actually share the valuable information that they find with a colleague. And again, think of this as the buyer collective, right? So they're probably sharing it with somebody else that's within that group that, is going to help make that decision.
Hello, welcome to the HealthTech Marketing Show. I'm your host, Adam Turinas. I run a company called Health Launchpad. We specialize in healthcare technology marketing, and we're a little bit obsessed as a company about today's topic, and that is how healthcare buyers buy technology. It's one of our driving passions, and I am so delighted to have my great friend Matt Carollo from HIMSS here today. Say hi, Matt.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Wait, I tell you what, you guys, HIMSS has been a long-term partner of Health Launchpad pretty much since the start. We've done a lot together, and you've sponsored the podcast, and I'm thank you to you guys for that. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we do some great things. So thank you.
I hope so. So Matt, tell us a little bit about what you're going to present today, but also maybe a bit about HIMSS Media and HIMSS, and so where it's just a bit confusing to people. Certainly, I get confused sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start with HIMSS Media. I think that when everybody hears HIMSS, they think about the global conference, right? But we're much more than that. We are really a healthcare company first and foremost, where our association has relationships with health systems globally, where we provide services to help them in their digital transformation journey. And we do that through our maturity models. But when you think about HIMSS Media, we have a media arm that provides vendors with different marketing solutions, everything from market insights to branding solutions to lead generation and strategic marketing services. So it's a full platform of solutions that we bring to market.
Yeah, I've always appreciated whenever I've got a client are interested in kind of getting a broad set of options of different things they could consider. I always talk to you guys. And what I'm always impressed with is this tailoring. I mean, you really think about the problem they're trying to solve and different ways of doing it, as opposed to here's our packages. And I think you guys really understand the nuances of this industry. So, yeah. All right, now, today's topic is the buyer studies. So what's the history of this thing? I mean, this is not the first time, right?
This is not a new thing. Yeah. And it's actually been in market for, years, even before I've been in. So as far as I know, it goes back at least to 2018, where there may have been a more comprehensive study that happened back then. And when I came aboard, which is about 4.5 years ago, we took a look at that and we distilled it down, right, to see what we thought was most important. And ever since then, we've been going to market with this survey to see, what changes, right? What are the trends taking place and how are things changing in market?
Well, we had the pleasure of presenting that in a webinar last year, and it was really well received. And, it's still downloaded. People download it from our website all the time. And I'm sure they download it from HIMSS as well. And just a little bit of housekeeping. So if you're listening to this, there is a video, because there's going to be some slides that Matt's going to present and some data. And so you can, if you'd say, hey, you know what, I'd rather watch it, you can click, there'll be a YouTube link down below. You can watch that. The other thing is, if you want to read along as Matt's going through this research, go to the link to the blog down in the show notes, because what you'll do is you'll be able to go in and download that. You do need to fill out a form for that, and then you'll be able to read along with this or read it afterwards. So let's get into it, Matt. I'm going to put up the research. If you're listening to this, we're going to talk through the data.
Yes, we'll try to speak to all the numbers as well, so that it's not just visuals, for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, if we look at the overview, like I said, we've been doing this for a while. So we have some trending data, and you'll see kind of year over year information that has changed. And I think that this year we actually got probably 3 times the responses that we have in previous years. So we're able to slice and dice the data a little bit more. And it's interesting because of some of the responses that we got to some of the questions that was a little bit surprising. We're able to dig into that a little bit further and see if it's applicable across the board, or maybe it's only applicable to a certain segment, for example. And that we did get a lot of respondents from different company sizes and different job titles. So the leader here is medium enterprise, which represents 100 to 5,000 employees. 30% of the respondents kind of fit within that category, followed by large enterprise, which is 5,000 plus employees. And then it kind of tiers off from there. And then job titles are vast, right? But IT kind of leads the way with the respondents.
Yeah. And the type of organizations are mostly provider organizations you talk to, right?
100%. Yeah.
But I think there's some health tech companies in there as well, maybe.
No, this is provider based. Yep.
Provider only. And what you're asking them about is how they buy all kinds of different technology, software, hardware as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And how many people are involved and how long it takes, right, to make that decision, and what content they're using along the way, right, to actually help make that decision. Yeah. And, 91% of the respondents are also indicated to us that they are either the primary decision maker or part of the group making those decisions. So, it's a very influential group of people that are answering the survey. So I guess getting into the buyer collective, right, as we like to call it, which is no individual is making these decisions, right? They're all working in a group. And we really want to understand how many people are involved in that buyer collective. So there are different segments here that we have. We asked about, is it fewer than 5 people? Is it 5 to 9 people? Or is it 10 or more people? And almost 6 in 10 of the organizations said that there are 5 or more people that are part of the tech buying process. 23% of those orgs say that there are 10 or more people involved in that decision-making process. So there are many different stakeholders to consider when you're thinking through your content and marketing strategies.
And has that changed at all?
So it's similar to our previous years for sure. I think this year there are more respondents on the smaller side of the group, right, with the fewer than 5 people.
Yeah.
But again, having the data to kind of dig into a little bit, we're able to look at, okay, when we look at that particular response, is that applicable across the board, or is it just for maybe smaller organizations? And kind of as I think you would expect, right, it is more applicable to the smaller organizations, right? So 71% of small businesses did respond and indicate that their buying collective is fewer than 5 people.
Right. So the smaller hospitals, large physician group practices, things like that.
Correct.
And it's fewer than 5. Yeah.
Yep. And it's applicable to nonprofits as well, which is not necessarily surprising either. And it does show up, right, in other organizational sizes, but definitely at a much lower percentage.
And larger organizations, what are we seeing here? Like where it's 5 to 9 or 10, 10 or more people involved. It's close to a third of the organizations say there are 10 or more people involved. And then most of the rest are saying it's 5 to 9. So that's kind of, that's fairly consistent with what we saw last year, if I recall.
It is. That's right. Yep.
And it looks like the roles here are heavily IT, but not exclusively, right?
100%. When you look at the makeup, right, of those buying teams, the responses show that multiple functions are part of this tech buying process. So like you said, while IT is the leader, it's definitely a collaborative effort that spans across executive leadership, finance, clinicians, operations. And this really just underscores the complexity of the buying teams when it comes to purchasing technology.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're listening to this, you're thinking, wondering what the data says. It's like 95% said that IT is involved in the decision, and 3/4 are saying finance are involved, and more than half are saying clinicians and operations are involved, and about half are saying administration's involved. So everybody's involved, right? It's kind of what people are expected to see, but that isn't changing, and it's not going to change anytime soon.
Totally.
I think where I think the surprises came out in this year's study is actually in the decision making, because last year the thing that stood out was that the average buying cycle was 13 plus months, and I think for 40% it was even longer than that. It was much longer, some as long as 24 months.
Correct. Yeah,
that changed a bit in this year's study.
It did, and it was kind of surprising to see. I think you may have mentioned it earlier, right? Last week we did some webinars with groups of chief marketing officers, and they kind of validated this data, right? Which is a great thing because we're making sure that it's correct. But it's interesting because when we look back to 2018, over 50% of the respondents back then reported the length of the buying cycle to be 12 plus months. And as you just mentioned, right, last year, a big majority, or a big portion rather, of the companies were saying that the life cycle was 2+ years, over 40%. But now we're seeing that 2/3 of the companies are saying that this cycle is actually within a year.
Yeah.
And the other third are saying that their cycle is longer than a year, with the majority of those being 19 plus months. So again, it's interesting to look at the breakout, but this was definitely one of those significant changes this year.
Yeah. And I think part of that is reflected in that you've got more data this year from a broader cross section. So it may be that part of this is because you can see that with larger organizations, the majority of 7 to 12 months, but still over 25% are more than 13 months. But with the smaller organizations, the majority are under the 12-month mark. So it's and that's kind of what you expect to see, right? I mean, smaller organizations make decisions quicker. And it's hard to infer too much from it, but maybe there's a hope here that we're sort of now back to kind of a pre-COVID normal in terms of decision making. It certainly feels like it. I mean, this to me reminds me of the buying cycles when I was running my software company, which was in the 2010s, right? I mean, that was, that felt very much like average life cycle, 9 months, and we were selling an enterprise communication system. Now, we're going to switch gears here and move sort of down a level to what is it that actually influences their decisions. And so I thought this was very interesting. And as you said, when we got into the discussions with the members of the HealthTech Marketing Network, who we gave a sneak peek to a couple of weeks ago, they were really interested in this. So share with us here, what are the takeaways here in terms of content?
Yeah. So this is another interesting one, right? Because when we look at the trending information and we go back to what we were seeing, 5-6 years ago, over 50% of respondents were telling us that they're seeing content that is too product oriented or too sales focused. And in the last year or so, which is similar to this year, we look at the respondents and 78% of people are telling us that product demos are important to them when researching a potential tech vendor. You'll see that number 3 is vendor-focused content like case studies and white paper.
Let's just pause a second here for folks listening. So what this is, the question was, when evaluating potential technology vendors, which types of contents do you find most valuable? 78% said product demos, 61% said peer-focused content, and then 56% said vendor-focused content, so case studies, white papers, ebooks, and then almost an equal number, 55% said research and data insights. 43% said they valued thought leadership, and then things like infographics at 35%, and then product information videos, 24%. The thing which sort of is surprising, and it was actually quite controversial, was that webinars only seen as 19% as being important when they're evaluating technology vendors.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting data point. I think that, we got into some interesting discussions around that, right? Is it used for top of funnel, mid funnel, and that type of thing? And webinars show up later in the report as well when we talk about kind of useful information. So it's interesting that this question comes up that way and then comes up another way with another question.
I suspect, my gut feel on this is that the question's about evaluating. So it's quite a specific thing. And so product demos coming up high, not surprising, but good to see. I mean, those are important, right? You got to show them. And that webinars at that point, they're not that important. So maybe that's what this is selling.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway is that the buying habits have changed, right, over the last few years in terms of how people are leveraging content, when they're reaching out to sales and so on, right? A lot of that is done digitally, front. And so last year, we got a lot of questions around the product demo specifically, asking, hey, when people say that, are they looking for a live demo or are they looking for something that maybe is pre-recorded? So we added a new question this year that asks that exact question, right? When assessing product demos, do you prefer an actual live demonstration or do you find a product demo video to be equally effective? And the answer is both, right? We got a kind of 50-50 split, right? Where 50% basically are saying, hey, I prefer an actual product demo. The other 50% are saying video demos are just so valuable. So I think, when you're thinking through how to produce this content and how to go to market with it, I think the answer is you need both.
Yeah. I used to do some work with a client company who had a 30-minute long demo that you could watch online. And I think it was the only piece of gated content they had on the website, or one of the few. And they would wait until somebody watched that, completed the form, watched that before the SDRs would reach out to them, because that was the only way that they knew that those people had a very high conversion rate, and anybody else that they got in touch with earlier than that was a very low conversion rate.
Yeah, I mean, that goes into kind of intent signals, right? It sounds like that was their highest intent signal.
That's like a lower funnel one. So next topic was around, vendor criteria. And so the stuff that comes out here, validating, not particularly surprising. The top one is proven success with other healthcare organizations. So, social proof. And then sort of equally important things like ease of use, cost efficiency, and privacy and security standards. It's sort of like everything is important. The proven success is important to her. I thought the thing which was sort of surprising was that the one which was seen to be the least important and actually was given a pretty low rating. Only 24% said it was important. It was short deployment times. I'm kind of interpreting from that. People kind of know it's like, the deployment times are not on you vendors, they're on us. So if you told us you've got short deployment times, we're going to say, oh yeah, not in our place, they won't be.
Absolutely. Yep, we all know how that goes.
So let's get back to this content question. So there was another question here, which is, how do you use healthcare technology related information to support your job function? And this is obviously, so this is kind of really an interesting sort of set of questions. But to share the data, so that we're going to kind of read out some of the top stuff.
Yeah, I think, this is the same as last year as well, but using content to make informed technology purchasing decisions, right? 70% of the respondents chose that as a response to the question, which again is not necessarily surprising, but it just reinforces, right, that they're using this information to make these decisions.
Exactly. It's like, 70% of them saying they use healthcare technology related information to make technology informed purchase decisions. Only 30% use it to monitor the competitive landscape, and 50% use to gain insights from thought leaders and industry peers. So it's just basically saying is, we need the content, whether it comes from a third party like HIMSS or whether it comes from you as a vendor in making purchase decisions. And that's our very, very important part of our job. So keep making that great content, people.
Hey, one other thing on that last slide is that I think that it correlates with the data, right? When you look at what's the response here, they're looking to understand how others in the field are navigating challenges. And that goes back to case studies, right? And that type of thing. And almost 60% of people gave that response, right? They want to understand the challenges and see what solutions are out there that they could put in place to solve for that.
Yeah. So let's get back to sort of a next kind of level on the content question. And the question was, in the past 12 months, which resources did you use to research technology vendors? So 62% said industry websites. So industry websites would be websites like HIMSS. So I guess, that would be a HISTL like that, right?
Healthcare, IT news, Moby Health, those types of
industries. And then industry peer networks and large scale in-person conferences, vendor websites and professional associations was sort of the next block. They were kind of almost equal seconds. So industry peer networks HIMSS would definitely be one, probably Chime as well, right? And then large scale in-person conferences, global conference in March, Vive next week, the Chime conference, those are equally important. I think it's what to me is most interesting was that vendor websites is seen as important as those as sources of information. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised at that, but it reinforces the importance of having just great content and information on your website, product marketing information that helps them as they're making decisions in their purchasing.
100%. Yeah. And I think that kind of correlates with the other slide that we're seeing about, again, vendor focused content, right? And product demos. And it all starts with your website, right? Making sure that the foundation is there and then fueling it with the content that we're talking about to really educate the buyer collective, right? When they're ready to make that commitment to researching, make a decision, right? To buy your technology.
I thought the other thing that's also of note is that webinars here come up. Again, question was, in the past 12 months, which resources did you use to research technology vendors? Webinars come up as 47% said that they used it. Now, it goes back to the previous question. It came down as very low. But again, that was about evaluation. So what that to me says is that, as I'm doing the early stage research, I'm going to watch the vendor webinars and informational webinars because it helps me as we're thinking this through. I just think it's not a late stage tactic for many that's valued by many. Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought also the other thing that sort of stands out to me is social media platforms. So, only 26% say that they use it to research technology vendors. So I guess for research, social media is not great. Like advertising on LinkedIn is a good awareness tactic, but don't expect that your buyers are going to be actively researching there. They may use it to connect with peers, but that's not where they're doing research. Maybe not a particularly big surprise there. Yeah, you want to talk about the types of content. And so the question was, in the past 6 months, which of the following actions have you taken after engaging with valuable healthcare technology related content?
Yeah. So we're trying to see, okay, if somebody is engaging with this content, right, that they see as valuable, what are they doing, right? Are they downloading it? Are they sharing it? And so on. The number one answer at 73% is basically they're downloading it, right? The response is they've registered for a webinar, white paper, or other gated asset. So think of this like lead generation, right? So they're downloading the asset or they're getting behind the gate, right? Because they're interested in understanding what is behind that gate. The second response at 71% was conducted further research on a vendor's product or service. So, they're finding information. Now they're digging in a little bit more. Or they're sharing the information with a colleague. So 68% said that they actually share the valuable information that they find with a colleague. And again, think of this as the buyer collective, right? So they're probably sharing it with somebody else that's within that group that, is going to help make that decision. 66% of people said that they requested more information on a solution. And then 55% said they reached directly out to a vendor rep. So they're taking action. And actually, just another call out here, over 80% of the respondents said that they did take action within the past 6 months after discovering valuable information. And this is kind of the actions that they're taking. So again, it's this digital journey, right? And then it's turning into something else where over half of them are directly reaching out to their vendor rep.
Very interesting. Over half. And the other thing is that 73% are filling out forms. And so all this thing about don't use gated content is, a thing of the past. It's just simply not true. And I think if 73%, if 3/4 of the people that anybody listening to this is trying to reach will fill out a form, I would say keep going on the gated content. Use it carefully, but don't stop doing it.
I think it's kind of reflective of the buyer's journey, right? It starts at the top and they kind of go through that process. So agreed. Trust, right? Trust is always a very important factor. So we like to ask the question about how trustworthy do you consider each of the following information sources? And we list out a whole bunch of information sources when evaluating healthcare technology sources. This year, industry peers and networks came up as number one, with 89% of the people that responded selecting that, 81% for professional associations, 72% for in-person events, right? So I think that just reflects those kind of top three, that it's about that in-person experience, right? That connection, that relationship building, and so on, that builds that trust.
Yeah, we are kind of back to pre-COVID, right? I'm really looking forward to seeing how many people are going to be at Global Conference this year. I'm sure numbers will be even more. And I'm sure the same is true of Vive and Chime as well. Okay, so give us the key takeaways here. So what are the, 5 things that anybody listening to this podcast should bear in mind?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think, number one is the buyer collective, varies in size based on the size of the organization, but the complexity remains as, the collective is made up of multiple people, right? Sometimes more than 10 people, and they're working across a variety of functions. I think the next takeaway is that the length of the buying cycle for tech investments seems to be shortening across the board, right? Which I think is a good thing for everybody. But there still are a third of the organizations that say that it's 13 plus months. And in some cases, 13% of the respondents' life cycle. When you look at content, right? Content that's most important to the buyer collective now includes vendor-specific information, right? Again, 78% of respondents told us that product demos, and that's both live and on demand, are important to them when researching tech, followed by peer-focused content like executive briefs and vendor-focused content. So again, think case studies, white papers, and so on. So I think really the major takeaway is really informing the buyer collective at the right time with the right content on the right platform, right? Making sure that they are providing access to information across platforms that are trusted platforms that will drive action amongst these individuals, right, that make up this buyer collective, and ultimately help them get approval for making that purchasing decision.
Well, that last point is so important. I think for anybody listening who's, runs or is involved with the marketing of healthcare technology, so many people are struggling to justify the budget, to justify resources to the C-suite. And I feel that this research helps to validate the importance of creating great content, of having a really good website, of having the right message in front of the right person at the right time through channels like whether it's, HIT News or whether it's LinkedIn or wherever it happens to be where they are is critical. And it's not just critical for the marketing department to be able to sort of generate leads and that sort of thing. It's critical for the buyers because the buyers want this information. They need it as part of their job. It's the number one reason that they want this information is in helping them make purchase decisions. And so what you're doing out there by creating great content is not just in service of your company, it's in service of the buyer. It's such an important point to take away. Matt, thank you. Really appreciate your presentation. And, thank you to you for stewarding this. And thank you to everybody at HIMSS Media for doing this research. It is so important to this community. And I hope that you will continue doing it for the foreseeable future.
For sure. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, everybody out there, if you're listening to this, you say, I know I want to see this. I want to see the data. Well, you've got two options. Number one, check out the link down below to the blog and you can go through, fill out the form and you can download the research, or you can click and watch the show so you can watch the video a bit. So you have both of those options. And if you're watching the video and you want to kind of, you think, hey, I haven't heard of this show before, but this sounds kind of interesting. You can subscribe to it on Spotify or Apple, whatever podcast application you use. This is episode, I think, 77. We have a ton of different episodes of, research, talking with marketers, focusing on particular topics like ABM, on all kinds of different issues. And the buyer journey is one that we just keep coming back to because it's so important. So check that out. And by the way, lastly, if you're interested in Health Launchpad and so what we do. So, in short, what Health Launchpad is, we're a health tech marketing agency, but a little bit more than that, our aspiration is that we are considered by our clients to be their pipeline growth partner. And we earn the right to do that every day through ABM programs, through great content, great messaging, and all kinds of innovative ways to generate pipelines. So check us out at healthlaunchpad.com. Matt, once again, thank you to you. Thank you to HIMSS. And to everybody out there, thank you for listening. And with that, I will bid you farewell.